And
hello, everyone, and welcome to Co-Creation Station, the podcast where we talk about the law of attraction, the art of allowing, spiritual magic, the mind-body-spirit connection, and how to best enjoy this mystical, miraculous, mysterious, crazy, sometimes confounding, but always incredible journey we call life. My name is Collin. I am a teacher, tarot oracle card reader. I'm the singer and guitarist in the band Red Treasure, and I'm located in beautiful, sunny North Hollywood, California.
hi, Collin. My name is Stephanie. My name is Stephanie Orlina. I'm a transformational life coach, and I help people shift away from negative thinking. And I'm in San Diego.
We want to thank you so much for listening to the show. If you're listening on the audio version on Spotify Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or whatever podcast platform they have 1,000 years from the future, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching us. If you're watching us on the Co-Creation Station YouTube channel, at this point we are posting a brand new episode every Monday morning. Thank you so much for liking, following, subscribing, and reviewing us on whatever platform you're consuming us on. We appreciate that very much. If you're watching on YouTube, please leave us a comment. And no matter how you're watching or listening, you can always email us at cocreationstation1111@gmail.com. Each week we start our discussion from a different jumping off point. And this week, once again, we are very pleased and excited to have my sister as a guest, Dr. Kelly Worster, chiropractor from Portland, Maine.
Yay! Welcome, Kelly.
Welcome, Kelly. Glad to have you here. And you have the jumping off point for this week's discussion. So I'll turn it right over to you.
So for those listeners and or watchers of this podcast, if there is ever a question of why, when it first starts, is there a lot of giggling and laughing and weird faces from Kelly as the guest in particular, it's because you never know when Collin is going to hit record.
That is not true. The way you just said that, I will say that is not true.
And
Collin hits the record button almost always when the podcast has started.
Without notice to the other two people. Anyway, so
there's
a little message that pops up, and it says the host has started recording. And that's it. You're being recorded. And sometimes it's in the middle of something that you didn't expect. And then my funny face is about, I keep thinking, if you have two choices in that window, it says got it or leave meeting, and I always want a third button, which is pause.
I gotta change that setting.
What's the third one? Veto Collins vote. Oh, that's great. But yeah, so welcome to my world, darling. Yeah, just in case you wonder, because sometimes it always seems like Stephanie's giggling in the beginning of every podcast. Now you know why. Regular listeners know that,
in my defense,
friend time.
We need to talk about the actual topic, or the actual discussion, but in my defense, number one, Stephanie now does this as much as me when it's just her and me. Like, I've been in mid-sentence with something multiple times now over the last few weeks, and Stephanie's like, hey, stop, hit record. And secondly,
and then I start to giggle. It's just like
notice.
Right.
I mean, that's notice, by the way.
That's true. He didn't do that. So it was like he was treating you like me. Like he was just like new. You're like,
anyway,
I'll cop to that. I do that on purpose because it amuses me terribly. And I'm just trying to feel good and have a positive vibration so I can allow more of what I want into my life. But honestly, all joking aside, I mean, we've said this before if you've listened before, but Stephanie and I have had the experience multiple times of we transition from our just friendship talk in what we call friend time before the recording on Sundays to something that involves the law of attraction or whatever, not intentionally, but we're just talking about our week, and then we transition over into the art of allowing or whatever. And we've had the few times where we've just kept talking thinking, oh, we're just in friend time here, and then we realize like 15 minutes later that we had 15 minutes of fantastic conversation.
We should have hit the button.
So that's why we do that. But I do accept that I do it in a sudden and disturbing way for my own opinion.
I'm used to it now. That's why I start giggling, because sometimes it still catches me off.
Like she knows what's coming. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but that's
Yeah.
why you'll oftentimes. But anyways, Kelly,
So
where do
we
you-
digress, but just so the audience is aware,
Yes.
in case they wonder. So what I wanted to talk about, lately in the past couple of months, 3 months in my office, my patients have talked about, that I hear quotes like the world is going to hell, and just hearing just general stress about what's going on in the world, and our country, et cetera. And, I'd really like to talk about how, the art of allowing works, how we can use that art to not only improve our communities and our world, but to help us feel better. And also knowing that both of those things happen at the same time, right? If we feel, Stephanie, you say this all the time, if we feel good, it has an impact on everything around us. It has sort of a butterfly effect, if you will.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about that. And Stephanie, what would you tell a client that, a brand new client, haven't worked with them before?
What did I tell you, Kelly?
Well, I didn't call you and say the world's going to hell. I mean, that's a
No,
really,
you didn't. However,
really
you
impactful
did.
statement.
Yeah.
You just call me and tell me that?
You did. There were things going on in your life that were really upsetting you. So it's kind of a similar thing, right?
Yeah.
Where your focus and attention was on something that was disturbing you, and that was all you thought. Like that had your primary focus was on that. And so
felt like the walls were closing in, and that's very similar to what I hear. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that they're very lucky to have you in their lives, because if they see you weekly, they get to have an experience with you that is very different than maybe someone else that's in their lives, because you practice the art of allowing. You know about how the law of attraction works and how what you focus on grows and everything entailed. And so by you showing up that way in their lives, you're actually, when they're having an experience with you, they're having a different experience in their neurotransmitters. So they're, they meet someone, oh, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. And someone who feels similarly, they have this conversation for an hour, half an hour, 30 minutes, 45, an hour. And all they do is they're digging that groove of like, blah, 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 blah. However, with you, they're having a whole different experience. And so there's one little neural pathway that's over here. This other one's really deep, like the Grand Canyon, right? It's been done. And I think that's how, like, I even feel like now with my coaching, it's just so much a part of how I show up in life, that even like if I'm at the grocery store, or if I'm with my niece, or I'm with a neighbor, like it's just how I show up, and it exudes from me most of the time, because I'm human, I'm not feeling that. And so it's being part of, I always like this, being part of the solution instead of part of the problem. So I think you being in their lives has an impact, and by not engaging with them on that topic, because we can't convince them otherwise.
But and that's not my job, to counsel them or whatever. But even I've noticed in the past, like one or two words or phrases really help turn things around.
What were those?
But man, I wish I could remember. It's like, this morning there was a political show on television, and it was the winners and what are the winners of the week and what are the losers of the week, and it was just things were flying around, and then but the man that was supposed to close it out said, you know what, I don't want to talk about losers. It's June, it's Maine, and we all have something to be grateful for. I was like, wow, what a cool way to close out a political
and what's really interesting, that sounds to me like the news. They'll do 58 minutes of bad news, horrific things, and then the last minute or two they'll go, and by the way, something light and fluffy. And I'm like, shouldn't that be reversed?
Mm-hmm. Well, and also let's talk about how the listeners of this podcast can, take a dark time, whether it's in their lives or whether it's, the news of the day, what's going on in our country and our world, and try to be a light in that dark. Like, how can they do that on a practical level?
You mean when they're going through a dark time, how can they take care of themselves? Or when they're seeing darkness, how do they bring light to it? Because those are two different things.
When they get news about a shooting or, something, how do you, what's the best way, the most useful way to acknowledge what's happened, but yet keep, feel those feelings, and yet don't, be a light, essentially.
Go ahead, Collin.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to interrupt. I just had a few thoughts here. One of them is, and this, I think I've heard Abraham Hicks, who is this, Esther Hicks is a person who channels, I keep getting comments from people who watched or listened for the first time. I'm like, you say Abraham 700 times, you never tell us who they are. So Esther Hicks is someone who channels a collection of beings who are on the other side or whatever, and they give us universal wisdom through her, basically. So I've heard this from Abraham and from Wayne Dyer, that there is this, it's not the information that's the problem. Like when you hear about something that, a news event where many people are suffering, it's not the fact that you get that information as text or as words or whatever. It's what your brain does with that, and then how that translates into your thoughts, feelings, and vibration. And the challenge is that when you hear about difficult, whatever you want to call it, challenging or difficult or grim news, first of all, one of the things we do is, which is kind of natural, you can understand it, but we place a judgment on it that it's wrong and it shouldn't have happened. So right away, you're kind of in a problem there, because you're basically saying that something that's already happened should not have happened. So you're kind of like living, all of a sudden you're putting your mental space in somewhere that's like not in line with the universe, because you're saying like the way this went, it shouldn't have gone that way. That's not to, and this is tricky, because it's not to say that you have to love it and you have to be like, oh, it's great that 16 people were suddenly killed today and blah blah blah. That's not the point. It's just that if you start fighting what is, if you start fighting what has already happened, you're setting yourself up to be in a vibration of resistance, like from the get-go. It's going to be very challenging for you to get back into an ease and allowing a positive, thought, feeling, vibration. If your starting point is, I'm resistant to something that has already transpired, So the next thing that happens is, if we have empathy or sadness or pain or anger or whatever in reaction to this information, which also is very human, that's not some, crazy thing. Like, it's natural for you to watch, if you're watching a news story and you see people suffering, it's natural to have empathy for them, their loved ones, all that sort of stuff. But then we sometimes do this other thing, is like, we want to get upset enough so that that will not happen in the future. Like, it's like, if I get sad and angry,
interesting that we
if I get
mentally think that's even possible.
Yeah, if I get sad and angry enough at this thing, it will stop happening. And like Wayne Dyer says, you can't get sick enough to make another sick person healthy. You can't get poor enough to help another poor person get rich. And that sounds cold-hearted, but it's not. It's not that you can't have empathy for that person. Whenever I see a homeless person begging on the streets of Los Angeles, sometimes I give them money, sometimes I don't. But Wayne Dyer made the suggestion, like, when you see them, if you can't give them money,
bless them.
Ask the universe to bless them with a shower of abundance.
Yeah.
So what you're doing there is, you're not fighting. You're not. I could see that homeless person and go, you know what? Everybody deserves a home in this world. it's our evil nature as humans where we get these, situations of greed and government corruption, all these things that can't fix, blah, blah, blah. And like, rah, rah, rah. And what I'm doing on a vibrational, emotional, psychological, vibrational level is I'm sending out like, things I don't like, energy around things I don't like, energy around things I don't like. And as Stephanie says, it's not that the universe like goes, oh, this is how I used to think about it. Like, oh, Collin likes bad things, I'll send him more bad things. I am sending out a vibration, and the universe is just a field, essentially, that's just like bounce. It's like a wall that's just bouncing vibrations back at me. So if I'm like, oh, things I don't like, that's what I'm sending out.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to see is more homeless people on my journey that make me more upset. And that's not the universe trying to make my life difficult, but that is my vibration creating more of what I don't want. Essentially at my, I'm the one running that a little bit. I'm the one creating the vibration. Now, a lot of times that's unconscious. We don't realize we're doing it. But I think one of the things we can do is we can bring more and more awareness to that and understand that it's not about like ignoring the news or ignoring homelessness or ignoring things. It's more like understanding, A, how can I live a happy life even though these things are going on in the world? And B, how can I actually do something effective on a vibrational spiritual level that actually will help that? Because what we now know about vibration is if I'm just getting angry all day about homelessness, I am creating more homelessness. And that's not solving the problem.
Well, and you're not feeling good in the moment either.
And I'm making my own life miserable, which,
what hurts us hurts our community and our world.
Yeah, like if I walked up to a homeless person and said, I just want to let you know I'm so upset about you being homeless that I'm going to make more people homeless and I'm going to be miserable about homelessness my whole life. That homeless person would be like, please don't do that. That doesn't help me and it doesn't help you. Like, what are you doing?
And sometimes in that particular situation, sometimes if I have something in my car that I can give them that would benefit them, I do. Other times, I'll just, as I see them, I'll say, bless you and bless me, and that I know in my mind, like you're asking, and the answer is being, we were saying earlier, whenever there's a problem, there is a solution, and whenever there's a question, there is an answer. But what I like to say, this kind of reminds me of when I've been driving and I'll see an accident up ahead, or I drive by one, and I'll just mentally like send, well-being to everyone. I pray that they all be provided what they're needing and wanting, and bless everyone, and that everyone involved, whether it be family, the people helping, friends, anyone that's been in contact with this situation and has affected them, that they all be served for their highest good and all receive what they're needing and wanting. And I think that is probably something that if more of us did that in situations in what you're discussing, Kelly, or like, hearing about a shooting going on, is like blessing it, like sending everyone love, because whoever caused that situation, like I love Abraham says, someone who causes pain to another one is not in the vortex. When we're in the vortex, I can't think a negative thought, and I would never harm anyone. I'm always coming from a place of love and joy, peace, harmony, whatever. But someone who does something like that is in extreme pain, and they are absolutely outside of the vortex. And this can sound uncaring and judgmental, but whoever participated in that, whoever was in that vibrational field, their vibration in some sort was attracted to that situation. Like there's never any victims when we think about it energetically, because if I think about my home being robbed all the time, what do you think I'm going to attract? When I think about I have safety around me always and I'm protected, what do you think I'm going to attract? So it's really about paying attention to it's really about paying attention to how things feel, and we can have empathy and we can send it love and light, because there is always that yin and that yang, the opposites and stuff, and we need that to have the contrast for things to improve. I was thinking the other day when I was washing clothes, and it's so easy to go to my washer and dryer, and I was thinking about my grandmother, and I remember when I was a small kid, she had her having a washboard and washing clothes, and then I remember when she got her washer, and she was so happy. And whenever there's a problem, we're asking, right? Like all those people that were affected, everyone who watched that on TV was shooting out rockets of solutions of what they wanted to have be better. But what happens is we look at the problem and we stay in that and we think about the problem and why is that, and and we go on, and the more we focus on something, the bigger it gets. And we can't get to the solution when we're focused on the problem.
And you talked before about resistance too. So can you talk a little bit about that and how is it?
Well, I want to just jump in, and because we've talked about this. One of our first episodes ever was like how to talk about the new year. We started the podcast like in late December and going in, and I had picked up on this thing where, at the beginning of every year, especially across social media, Facebook, Instagram, all that kind of stuff, Twitter, like everybody has this optimism for the first few days. And then as soon as like what people consider to be like a bad news event happens, they start, all of a sudden you start seeing these posts and tweets of like, oh God, here we go, I guess. And they personify the year like, oh, 2022 is going to be terrible. And then all of a sudden, like, then it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like every negative news event gets attributed to this person, this fictional person that's the year 2022. And it's like this villain, like attacking people, because it's like, oh man, I can't wait for 2022 to be over. But the thing is, if you go back over the last 10 years, that's happened every single year. And I think there's something that like people think like, oh yeah, I know we've had rough times in the past, but now it's really bad. And with the pandemic, it's been very tempting to do that. A lot of us politically, because of who was president for 4 years recently, that it was a big excuse to do that. But the reality is if you zoom out, and I try to remind myself of this, it's very difficult, but if you zoom out of where you live and the time in which you live, and you look at all human history across the globe, at least what's recorded and what we can know about, it's like, there's always good and bad shit going on. You know what I mean? There's always war. There's always natural disasters. Like there's no place on earth that's safe for a human to live completely not in danger of any natural disasters. Like every place you can live in the world has the statistical chance of like a hurricane, an ice storm, an earthquake. People make fun of me for living in LA. I think we do have way too many of those possibilities here. But there's no place you can go and like you'll never have a natural event that would threaten your life. I mean, everywhere you go, there's something. And history has been like that. Like, and the thing that really rocks my world is if you look at, things are actually if you want to look at statistics, right now in 2022, on the biggest scale possible, we are living in the safest time, the most wealthy, abundant time. Like people have, like again, I'm talking statistics. This is all averages across countries, levels of population, all that sort of stuff. Like people have more money in 2022 than humans have ever had. They have more disposable income than they've ever had. They have more safety than they've ever had. Why that doesn't sound like it's true is because it's really
because we don't focus on it. One thing.
Well, and it's really easy to keep throwing the media onto the bus, but essentially what the media has, I think, just clicked into is like the fact that we talk about this all the time. The lizard brain, the human mind, was built to look for dangers, threats, and problems. And the spotlight effect that's now been proven in psychology makes that even worse, because what you do is your brain looks for a problem, danger, or a threat. When it finds it, it blows it out of proportion because it wants to solve it.
Are we going to determine how my life is going by what they're talking about in the news? Because if so, we're screwed. Like, I'm screwed if that's what I'm going to do. If I'm going to watch the news and let them tell me how good or bad my day is going or how good or bad life is, I'm foobarred.
But what you're not acknowledging there is that the media has sort of figured out that the human brain is set up to want to watch that stuff. Like, it's not like we're just like, we
I have
actually.
a choice. We have a choice. I remember I was.
You do, but it's
someone...
not like choosing. It's not like if somebody put Pepsi and Coke in front of you, you could choose either one. Your brain is going to naturally be attracted to the more what it views as the more compelling thing to watch. So you have to work to not to make the other choice.
And I've never said that this isn't work. It is work. We don't think of it as work, but it is. It's work for me to think about, for me to acknowledge and notice, what thoughts am I thinking? What am I putting my attention to?
Yeah.
How am I feeling? Does this conversation that I'm having with someone feel good or not? When I'm spending time with this person, or when I'm doing this thing, when I'm watching this movie or this show, or how am I feeling? Do I feel better when I'm done? Am I better for it?
Yeah. No, I agree.
We ask ourselves.
When we say it's a choice, I mean, it is. It absolutely is. I agree. But if you've been raised, for example, like if your entire family from the time you were born is negative and filling your head with negative messages, that person doesn't. Right. That person.
then it's a lot more work. It's more challenging than if you were raised by a very loving and positive and looking for the glass half full type of mentality. Then it is much harder work.
Right. And that's all I'm saying is, like, if you flipped on your television or your YouTube TV or whatever you watch these days, and there was equal amounts of, good-natured, wholesome stories and, just things that were information without judgment. And then there was what we traditionally see in the media, which is like taking a problem in the world and blowing it out of proportion, over-focusing on it. Then you'd have a choice. But the reality is 90 to 99% of what you can watch anywhere is taking advantage of that fact that they know that the human mind is drawn to drama, it's drawn to problems, it's drawn to threats and dangers. And once you hook into it, it's very difficult
it is a habit, like with anything. It is a habit. Mm-hmm. So Kelly, when you were talking about resistance, like, what were you referring to? Could you explain that a little bit to me?
Yeah, earlier you said when Collin was talking about resistance to what is, and why resistance actually creates more of what you don't want.
Right.
Like how that works, how the law of attraction is responding that way.
Let's see if I can explain this. So I think what Abraham is talking about is, like, we have to have the contrast. Like, I have to know what I don't want in order to know what I do want. So in life, in the game of life, I like to call it, we have to have all of it. Like Abraham talks about, you can go to a buffet. Think of life as a buffet. Like, you don't go to a buffet and go, like, personally, I don't like liver. So if there's liver, there's liver. Why do we have liver? I don't like liver. Why? But Collin could love liver and Kelly could love liver. So if I was to say, take out the liver, you would not like that, right? So we have to have an array of things. I use this example all the time. Like, if I'm not in a good mood and then I'm like rude to someone because I'm just like edgy or whatever, in that moment, even the person who I'm responding to is like, God, what's wrong? And we're both energetically shooting out rockets. Her of like, I want to be treated better, or him, I want to be treated better by this person. And then later me like, oh my God, I can't believe I was, you know what I mean? And so the next time I'm either interacting with that person or with someone else, I've put in my vortex of being kinder or being more mindful or, being more, whatever it was. And so the contrast actually makes for a better life.
Mm-hmm. That was the thing I was going to mention. Is like, and we've talked about this before a lot, but it's like there's so many things. It's not that you want difficult or challenging things to happen, but mm-hmm. like my first auto accident here in LA shone a light on the fact that I was thinking every day when I was driving, like, oh my God, I'm going to get in an accident someday. So when I finally had one, yes, it was traumatic. Part of me wishes it hadn't happened. but that was the way that I stopped. That was the beginning of my journey of not having accidents anymore, you know?
Wasn't
And
that
so there
a
was
gift?
value.
The contrast was a gift.
Yeah.
It ended up being a gift.
And they do say, go ahead.
No, I said we've mentioned before the famous study that tracks super lottery winners, like $100 million or more, and their level of happiness over time from when they win the jackpot to 5 years out, and compares that to people who suffer life-threatening injuries, you know, are in a life-threatening accident, survive, and their 5-year vector, and it's opposite. Like the lottery winners start out really happy and then decline steadily over time on average, and the life-threatening injury people initially are, you know, very unhappy, and then over time they continue to get happier because they had this experience where they appreciate their actual life and their actual happiness instead of just what they think something outside themselves could actually bring. So it's like, if you carry resistance about money, it actually doesn't matter how much money you get. Like people who are resistant.
All a vibration. I was going to say,
that's why I think
there are
lottery.
People who have won lotteries and have gone on to excel, and they're the minority because their vibrational set point of wealth and how to handle it, and still had whatever, they were able to continue to expand and grow and have abundant lives. Like if they didn't lose their wealth, but then it's all a mentality.
Yeah, it's probably a different podcast to do that whole discussion on it, but just briefly, I mean, essentially what we've learned with the research is that those large lotteries are kind of a scam. Like we kind of know now that they're a scam because they're going to attract the people that buy those tickets are people who have a deprivation mentality about money. And when they win, they almost always blow it within 5 years and end up exactly where they started. So they're spending all this money on the tickets. And even if they get the 1 in 34 billion and actually win the actual jackpot, it actually doesn't change their life at all on average. So it's like, we probably shouldn't be doing that.
So, Kelly, so there is a difference between resistance and contrast. And, yeah. So did that answer your question? I don't.
It did, and it reminded me of the quote, and I don't know who said it. I don't know who to credit, but what you resist persists.
Yeah.
Because essentially, energetically, if everything is like energy, by pushing up against something, it's going to help that push again. So if you don't push, there's nothing there.
Yeah, just like that tug of war, you know, like I like that tug of war. Where if someone lets go of the rope,
I think there's a couple of things I just want to briefly mention. One is I think we talked around this, but just to get really specific about it, it's okay to unhook yourself and your life from the world. And what I mean is, I don't mean go live in a hut in Alaska and like not talk to people. I mean, you can allow yourself mentally to have whatever happiness, success, whatever, and have it not depend on what's going on in the world. And there's zillions of examples of this, of like people who become fabulously wealthy during economic recessions. You know, people who, there's just all sorts of examples we could go through of like people that, if you don't let like your thoughts about how the world, your resistant thoughts about how the world could stop you from things. Like, well, I can't make any money right now in my business because we're in an economic recession. Or, well, I can't get a job as a teacher because, you know, they don't need any teachers right now. I just read an article about how we have too many teachers and there's 300 applicants for every job, so there's no way. Like, unhook yourself from that. Like, it's okay to unhook yourself from that. It doesn't mean that you're a cold-hearted person. You can still have empathy for everybody going through difficult things. But what you're allowing yourself to do if you unhook yourself psychologically is you're taking back, control isn't the right word, but you're allowing your individual vibration to determine your results rather than hooking that mechanism to a bunch of things that you can't control. I mean, one of my frustrations with professional sports, which Kelly and I both follow, is that you're sort of doing that. If you follow a professional sports team, which in most cases in America is 32 adult men you've never met and will never meet, you're hooking your vibration to what they do playing a game with a ball on a field of grass every week or every day or whatever, you know. And like, that's a rough, I mean, we don't have to do that. Like, we don't have to, but like, there are people more hardcore than Kelly and I who, like, if their team doesn't make the playoffs or whatever, they are literally in a psychological depression for 4 months straight. And they don't understand that they have the ability not to be that way. Like, they've hooked it so much to, like, my team has to do well for me to be happy, that they actually don't understand that they have that choice. The second thing I wanted to mention really quickly is Abraham's thing about everything's always working out for me, which was a mind blower when I first heard it. So I didn't think it could possibly be true. Like, it's one of those statements. It's like, really? Like, we can have anything we want? Really? Like, everything's always working out for me. But what that statement has been is it's like a train tracks that I can follow. Meaning, if my brain is telling me things are going well, my life's going great, well, that's awesome, because I'm going to have good thoughts anyway. I'm going to have good vibration, whatever. But if my brain starts to think like, oh, this thing in my life is bad or challenging or shouldn't have happened or it should be some other way.
And sometimes it is what it is. It'll pass. Everything eventually passes. Unless you focus on it forever and ever.
But what that phrase or sentence allows me to do is, like, if I roll with it instead of being resistant about it,
which is softening your vibration about it, right?
Like, things are going to go better in the future. And I'm going to be happier in the present.
Feel a little better in the moment, right? By saying that.
But, like, if I don't do that, it's like the track split. And I'm like, oh, am I going to have a bad month or a good month? Well, I guess I'm really upset about this thing, so I'm going to go down the bad month track, And it's like, again, I don't think a lot of people understand that they've made, as you said, made a choice to go down that bad track, because they feel like it's the external circumstances they have no control over. Yeah. But what they don't see is, like, but it's all of us are walking through this world interpreting things with our mind, creating thoughts, feelings, and vibration, and that is what is creating our life. It's not any external event, Like,
and I think a lot of people feel powerless. They feel like they don't have a choice, or that this is the way it is.
100%,
or, it was, my mom was like this, or my dad, or this is how my family is, whatever. And that's not true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And if you need any evidence that, like, of how your mind can shape reality, just to touch on some news, just not to get into it, but just like a couple of news stories that happened and how they affected people. Here in the United States, there's a war going on in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia in Europe. Here in the United States, there was a defamation trial between the Hollywood actors Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. And they were doing some studies about, like, basically Americans statistically were following the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial at a rate of 10-1 over the Ukraine-Russia war. Oh, and I listened, I forget the name of the expert that was interviewed, but it was brilliant. They were saying, like, why that just seems out of whack, because even if we accept this whole thing about we should worry about the world, well, obviously shouldn't we worry about, like, a war more than, like, two people, like a ex-wife, ex-husband fighting about something? And the expert said, well, this is specifically data in the United States right now. And he's like, the reason for this psychologically is everybody's been in a relationship, almost everybody's been in a romantic relationship and had a fight. And that's what our brains are interpreting. That's what the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial is about. It's about a husband and wife, or boyfriend girlfriend, having a fight. A war, an actual war. Americans don't have most Americans have no psychological experience of actually being in a war.
Yeah, because most of the people that have are no longer with us. They've transitioned.
We have veterans, obviously, from Afghanistan and Iraq conflicts, but most Americans, like, the real horrors of war are not a part of their daily experience. But fighting with your husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, that's something that we do regularly. So that's an example of how your mind is making choices for you, unless you consciously say, oh, okay, my brain is doing this for me. I don't want to think about things. What we're advocating is don't focus on either of those two news stories. Go meditate and take a nap and be happy. But it's one of those things that people say, well, this isn't, I don't have any control over this. Like, this is just the news in the world. It's like, no. Like, and the media followed this. Like, the media is covering the trial, like, at a rate probably bigger than 10-1 that now that they're covering the war. Because, again, my humble opinion, they know that people psychologically,
Yeah,
if they're
look
not
for the
making that
problem.
conscious
Yeah.
choice,
Yeah.
they're going to be more attracted to the trial than to the war. So that's what they're covering.
And I really like what Deepak Chopra said at the very end of his 90-minute talk one evening. At the very end, after saying all of these wonderful spiritual things, at the very end, he said, and you know what? The very best thing you can do is to take care of yourself. You know, show up in the best way that you possibly can, and that will absolutely change the world.
Yeah, if you boil it down, I'm amazed.
Show up. How I show up with you and everyone in my life, to the best of my ability. Because
I'm amazed how often the demonstration of the oxygen mask by flight attendants on the airplanes when you get on, it just applies to life. It's like, and it hooks in with that thing about you can't get sick enough to make somebody else healthy. You can't get poor enough to make somebody else rich. It's like, if you don't put the oxygen mask on yourself first, you're putting your child's life in danger, because if you pass out, you're both going to be.
You can't help anyone. And this is, I've seen this where parents will be like, oh, I think I need to send my child to therapy. And what I've heard from therapists is, like, when the parents get into therapy, the children end up being just fine. It's not the children. They're only responding to the atmosphere.
Yeah. All right. Well, great discussion. Thank you, Kelly, so much for that topic. That was a really good discussion. We hope
so great to see
you, the listeners and viewers, got something out of that for today. We want to thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. Please remember, on YouTube, you can leave us a comment. And you can, no matter how you're listening or watching, you can always email us at cocreationstation1111@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Kelly, if people want to contact you on the interwebs, how would they be able to do that?
My Instagram is Kelly from Maine, Kelly from Maine. And Facebook is Dr. Kelly, DrKellymane.
Okay. And if people want to find you, Stephanie?
On the web, powerinjoy, powerinjoy.com, and also on Instagram. And I look forward to chatting with you.
And you can always follow me or write me a direct message, as long as you're not 1,000 years in the future. On Instagram at Collin_Daniels_Worster. Collin has 2 L's, and Worster is Worster. Thank you so much again for listening or watching this week. We wish you to have a very abundant, low or resistance-free, fun and abundant week. And we'll see you next time right here on Co-Creation Station. Bye, everybody.
Bye.